Lately I've been thinking about this life and how it brought me here. Staring at this man in the mirror, I see him often here. Wipe my tears, only if you knew what I was going through. Only if you walked it in my shoes. Certain things don't like to talk about, but I'll always remember. The chaos in my mind turned my heart out in November. I'm surrounded by too many doors, not sure which way I entered. But I'm rocking with my loved ones, let you know that front and center. Found out my skin's tough as leather, I can storm through any weather. Addiction was the hardest battle I ever endeavored. It takes a lot of effort to apply all of this pressure.
Welcome to the Message Hope podcast, where the hope stands for hearing other people's experience. My name is Adam.
My name is Mike, and today on the show we have a young lady. She's got 9.5 years clean. Mm-hmm. I've heard she has an amazing story, so we got her on here finally. Welcome, Trish.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. Besides this holiday traffic that just took me forever to get here. But other than that, I'm good.
And what a commitment, right? 2.5 hours to get to a podcast just to come be of service. You can't beat that.
would have gone farther and longer for, way less.
Right. And I've known Trish basically for the last 9.5 years that you've been clean, Our relationship has had its ups and downs, not ups and downs in the sense of just up and down in the sense of closeness, At first we were distant, and we're close, and we're really close, and then we became distant again. If you guys can read between the lines, you guys are more than welcome to. That's all we're gonna say about that. But through our whole relationship, right? Being together, all that stuff, friends, all that stuff, our relationship has stayed consistent. You've always been somebody who's been a big cheerleader, right, in my life. You've always been someone who motivated me, right? The first convention I ever spoke at, me and you shared the stage together, right? And so, our relationship has changed, but the love has never changed. The admiration has never changed, right? And you have an absolute powerful story that I've seen you shake rooms with, you know what I'm saying? And so, and that wasn't the only stage we shared. What's that? What city did we go to?
That's right. Way up north. I mean, not up north.
Where does your dad go?
It was in the middle
Bakersfield.
Of the desert. It was scary and creepy.
Yeah.
Drive
it took
there.
2 hours to get there.
Yeah, and it was all side roads and side streets.
And then the highway that we were on, right? Everybody had bumper stickers that say that highway kills.
Yes.
The 395?
The 390, it might be.
Was it Innialkern or Ridgecrest?
Oh,
Ridgecrest.
Ridgecrest, I think that's where it was.
So we went out to Ridgecrest, bro. You know what I'm saying?
In the middle of nowhere. It was creepy. It was like ghost town.
Yeah.
Oh, my
God. I was
God.
more scared because I was driving and then all I kept seeing was this highway kills. I'm like, what's going on around here, bro?
There's a lot of accidents there.
Yeah.
And I didn't know people got clean at Ridgecrest, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's what they said when they shared.
Yeah,
they were
it's really bad out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like it. It was kind of creepy. I thought we were in the middle of a scary movie.
Yeah.
But we did win the 2020. We won the
50-50.
50-50. I said 2020. The 50-50. So that was good. That gave us our gas money back.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah. So let's kind of go ahead and jump into this.
So Trish, tell us where it all started. Where'd you grow up?
Man, so I grew up in the desert, Palm Springs area. That's where I pretty much was raised my entire life. I think it's so funny because everybody thinks that's the rich community and, but when you really live there, the stuff that's really going on there, Mm-hmm. And I am the product of an addict mother, Back in the day, things were different. Not going to say my age, but, we'll just, again, read between the lines of how long ago that was. But, people didn't understand being pregnant. You can't drink, you can't use drugs. Things were so different. It was, sex, drugs and rock and roll back then. And at that time, while my mom was pregnant with me, she was still using, not knowing the difference. So I was born, this is awkward with you guys staring. So I was born addicted. And with that being said, I was raised in a household where my mom was the dealer, and she was the man, and I know there was a lot of things that were going on in the house that was an uncomfortable place and an uncomfortable thing. And my mom did the best she could with what she knew. My mom wasn't raised by parents that took care of her. She was sent off to boarding school and was there for many, many years. And so my mom only did what she knew. And for a long time, I was very bitter and angry with her. I was resentful. I felt gypped. And by the time she had 2 other kids, those kids, she had learned how to be a mom, right? She all of a sudden had that love and attention to them and gave them the mom I always wished I had and couldn't understand why I couldn't receive, And so for me, I never had resentment towards my siblings, but I did from her. I never could understand why she couldn't love me the way she loved them. And for a long time, I felt like I was like this secret. There was some deep, dark secret and I couldn't understand. And like, as a kid, like you roll into like these thoughts and like, what could it be? And what is it? And, for me, I couldn't quite figure out what it was for a long time, but I do know that things got to a place where I was so resentful towards my mom and so angry at the way that I was raised, and that I started to become bitter and angry, and I didn't understand why. So I want to say that probably the first addiction that I ever had was anger, and I didn't even understand it or see it. Like I wanted to fight everybody. I was always mean. I was always angry. Like you looked at me a certain way, and I wanted to fight you because why did you look at me like that? And I always had like that wall up, and I couldn't understand why I was so bitter and angry. And it took me a lot of years to figure that out, Like I said, I came from a household that, there was a lot of drugs in the house for a long time. My mom's house was raided. I remember being young and the police coming and being ripped from my mom's legs, while she was being arrested for that. And just all the things that happened, there was a lot of sexual trauma as a child, and things of that nature. So I think that for a long time, I learned how to put a wall up, and I learned to just I had 2 feelings. They were either happy or mad. I didn't have anything in between. I didn't know what sadness was. If I cried, it was because I was angry, things of that nature. And what I found was I was in a household that I didn't want to be in anymore. And by the time I was 15, 16 years old, I met my kid's dad. And for me, that's when things started to change. So I went from one domestic violence situation, we'll call it domestic violence, being at home and being with all the stuff that was going on there, sexual trauma, physical trauma, emotional, mental, all that kind of stuff, to this man, grown man, 22 years old, that I met that saved me. And so with him, I ended up being with him, and it was always one of those situations where, for me, at least it wasn't what I had at home. So I always looked at everything, and it was always, well, at least it's not this. Well, at least he's not doing that. Well, at least it hasn't gotten to this, until all of a sudden the at least got to that, right?
Yeah.
And so the abuse started to get to a point where it wasn't just emotional and mental. Now it became physical, and I found myself in a predicament where he had 2 little boys that called me mom and lived in the house with us. And what I thought would be a great idea would be to have a kid, because maybe that will make it all better, right?
Yeah.
So here I am where, I have a kid, and it definitely didn't make it better. And then I had another kid, and it definitely made it worse. And things just became this spiral. And alcohol was my first drug. And I loved the way alcohol made me feel, because with alcohol, I didn't have to feel anymore. I got to be in this other world, and nothing else mattered. And, it was like my escape, And so for me, my story is a little bit different. Alcohol was the beginning. That was my gateway. And I tried to find any means to get away from him. And the abuse got so bad that the very last instance of him and I being together, I just remember it got so bad that I was sitting on the couch, and I remember him throwing this glass coffee table on top of me, which wouldn't be so bad except for my baby was on me. And the glass shattered all over her and I. And I remember running upstairs to try and get my other daughter and trying to grab her to pull away, and him pushing us down the stairs. And I have 2 kids, and I'm rolling downstairs. And that was like my last instance of like, I have to go. Like, I can't keep staying in this type of a relationship, and my kids are now being hurt. Like, it's one thing when it's me, but it's another when it's someone else, you know? Yeah. And so for me, I had to make the conscious decision. Our neighbor actually heard everything that was going on, and she came and like rescued me, right? And so what I knew how to do is to run. What I knew how to do is to go to the next abusive thing that I can find, because it always felt comfortable. Right. What I knew was how to be in these places that were not healthy situations, because I literally didn't know what healthy looked like. I didn't know what love was. I didn't know how to receive love, let alone to give love, you know? That's been probably my biggest thing in recovery, is trying to learn what love is for me, you know? I remember one day my old sponsor saying to me, what does love mean to you? And this was only a few years ago. And I remember being like, it just means love. I don't know what's love. And she was like, but define it. And I was like, it's just love. I like literally could not think of what the words would be. How do I describe what love is except for that it's love? And she said, well, if you can't describe it or know what it is, how can you give it or receive it? And that was so powerful for me, because I never really knew what love looked like. Love to me looked like pain. Love to me looked like hurt. Love to me looked like being isolated and alone and angry and bitter. And like, love to me never had a defining feeling. It only had like disappointment for me. The people that were supposed to love me the most are the ones that hurt me the most. So how can I understand or know what that means? How could I even be like that type of a mom to my children when I don't even know what that is like, right? And so for me, there was a lot of defining moments, and I continue to look for love in all the wrong places. And now I can understand that it's because I didn't know what love looked like. Love looked like for maybe a minute you were nice to me, right? Love looked like jealousy. It looked like control. It looked like, you know, all those things, right?
Mike's like, my God, I understand.
I can relate to that, yeah.
Psychosexual.
Yeah, so for me, it was like, I ended up finding myself, as soon as I left there, going into just another uncomfortable, you know, situation with another man, because that's all I knew is I couldn't do anything alone. I didn't know how to be alone. I didn't know how to be alone in my own skin. I didn't know who I was without somebody else, you know? And so I ended up getting myself involved with the wrong people and doing the wrong things, but trying to get whatever attention I could, no matter what it looked like. And I found myself in prison. And so by the time I was 24, 25 years old, I was facing a life sentence. Well, it wasn't life, it was 216 years, but we'll say that's life.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know how I got myself into that situation. I was fighting my case. I didn't know what I was gonna do. I have a 4 and 6 year old daughters that are sitting at home, and all of a sudden I'm finding out that I might not ever see them, you know, graduate high school, go, you know, get married, go to prom. Like, all of a sudden, like, the consequences of my actions I actually had to see, right? And I remember thinking to myself, like, I knew there was consequence. I'm not, you know, dumb. I know there was consequence, but like the reality of consequence is different, right? Like, knowing that it could happen, like, for me, everything that I was doing, like, I was like making excuses of why it was okay, you know, like, it's okay because I'm doing it because of this, and this is, you know, it's a good thing, and what I'm doing is helping others, like, and all those different ways, trying to like tell myself like I was doing the right thing when I knew I was doing the wrong thing, you know. And
so when you went to prison, so Were you using any other mind mood altering substances,
I
or
was
was it
gonna ask
just
that.
alcohol?
Just alcohol at that time.
Okay.
Wow.
And I'll
well, not
tell
just
you,
alcohol. That's a horrible way to.
When did it-
I know.
Yeah.
But-
Alcohol is a big drug. It's one of the worst out there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I know.
If not the worst. Yeah.
But I remember I remember being in jail and people being like, you did all that and you weren't even loaded? And I'm like, yeah, that's awkward. Maybe I should say yeah. But, you know, for me, like at the very beginning, that was my truth. But that's because my addictive nature was love, right? Trying to seek love, trying to seek that from somebody else, no matter what it looked like, right?
And you know what's crazy? You can't come to this kind of conclusion on your own.
Oh, no.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
Oh, no.
I'm hearing you talk and I'm like, I just have to let the listeners know this isn't from like one day Trish woke up and was like, oh, it's all because of love. It's all because I wanted the romance, right? It was like you've obviously done a lot of work in the last 9.5 years to be able to pinpoint all these moments in your life, right? To be able to share and express them in the way that you do and understand where all the deep rooted stuff is. So I just wanted to say that.
Oh,
real
yeah.
quick.
Oh, for sure. Because let me tell you, going into prison, that was the easy part. The easy part was prison. What I did know how to do is learn how to disassociate. So my mental health took a turn. And what I learned was putting a wall up was what I thought it was, but really it was a mental health challenge that I had. And later on discovered that there's a whole bunch of life I don't remember. And that's what my brain has done so that I don't... I don't have the traumatic experiences of like what the truth is of what really happened back then. There's things that I can remember, but I can't attach them to a feeling. So, however our brain works, thank God it works this way because that's how I was able to get through a lot of stuff. However, I ended up getting 6 years. I did my prison term, ended up being able to go to every single women's prison in California, whoop, whoop. So I don't know how that happened. And even ended up in fire camp. And so the very end, I just knew I was gonna go home and be better. But what happens is while I was in there, I had put this wall up so much, I didn't have feelings anymore. I got home and I didn't know how to function. And I had to go and live with my mom. So I hadn't lived with her since I was 15, 16 years old. And now I had to go live back in the same house where there was so much pain and hurt and unhealed stuff with my mom that it definitely, I wasn't ready for it. And I was so grateful for the things she did while I was incarcerated, such as taking my kids in, that I thought that I could just sweep it all under the rug. But really, that's when things started to change for me. And so what I will tell you is when I got out of prison, and the reason why I'm going to share this part is because at the end, I'll kind of tell you a little bit more. But when I got out of prison, I remember going to this parole orientation. And I remember this parole orientation was 50, 60 people in there. And I remember looking around, there was probably only 3 women, the rest were all dudes. And I remember, besides thinking they were all fine as hell, but that was my sick thinking, right? Was I'm never gonna amount to anything now. I have all these felonies on my record. No one's going to hire me. How am I ever going to be able to amount to anything after this? And I remember feeling this feeling of inadequacy and I was never going to be able to do anything. And there was this guy that had gotten out of prison after doing 25 years. And I remember him saying how he got out of prison, how he's different, how he walks with integrity today. And I remember him sharing all this stuff. And then he says, the life I live today, that even when I'm driving through shopping centers, when there's stop signs, I actually stop at them because that's what I do today. And my thought was, what a punk. Who stops at stop signs? I couldn't see the hope in anything he was sharing. It was woe is me. I couldn't hear what he said. But what's crazy is this was in 2007, and I still remember his story. But back then, I couldn't hear anything he said, and I felt no hope. I remember thinking like, oh, what is he, a janitor or something? You know, like stuff like that. I was so ugly and bitter to him, like just looking at him like he wasn't nothing, right? And it's such a trip to me today to think back on how I was feeling then, but I obviously heard what he said, even though I didn't think I did then, you know? And so I had to go and, you know, relive this life. And within a year I met the love of my life. That's a joke, guys. He's not the love of my life. I met another him with a different name, but with the same exact like characteristics, right? I always knew how to pick the him to be the exact same him as the him before, right? And so the patterns didn't change. And all you had to do was be a little bit nice to me for a minute. And all of a sudden I'm like, look it, oh my gosh. And what I do remember is this: I finally got my own place. My kids moved in, and I remember that I needed him to put together a bunk bed for my kids. And I remember it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was like, what a nice guy that he would come and put this bunk bed together at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. What a good guy he is, right? And so like I would see all these things, and people would tell me he was like getting loaded, and I'm like, he's fat. There's no way he could get loaded. Like, he's not getting loaded. In my head, I'm like, tweakers are skinny and like, you know, bite their ears off and like, you know, look like zombies. And he didn't look like that. And so I used to like get so mad, and I started to get so territorial to him because of all the stuff he did for me. Because at the very beginning, everybody's so nice, you know, until they've got you wrapped around their little finger, right? And so for me, there was so many signs, and I didn't want to see them. There was so many things that I didn't want to see. And I knew his family, and he knew our family my whole life. And so I started to, it wasn't until probably about 2 years into him and I being together that one day he took the pipe out and was like, let's just, you know, have fun. Let's just play around. Let's party. And I'm like, no, that's weird. Like, I remember thinking like dope was like an addict, like people are, you know, on the streets and they look crazy and like all this kind of stuff. Like, this isn't the partying drug. It's not coke. You know what I mean? Like, I remember thinking all these thoughts, and he's like, you don't have an addictive personality. You'll be fine. Look at you. Like, look at your life. You'll be fine. And I was like, he's right. Look at me. Yeah. So that was fun. So for me, like the beginning of my addiction, my story's a little different. I was 30 years old when I used for the first time, you know. I was still drinking and I was still doing all those things. And then that first year, like a lot of trauma came up for me. Like a lot of things started to happen. I started to remember trauma that I had forgotten. I started to like, things started to come up. Things started to, I started going to church, and while I was going to church, it was like these realms were starting to open for me, and things that I hadn't seen or remembered were all of a sudden coming. And
this is after you start using?
This was right before I started using. And I think that's where things started to make a shift for me. I was with the wrong person. All of a sudden, like, I'm going to church. All of a sudden, like, these things start happening, and I'm starting to see these things and remember these things. And this trauma started to open up like a wound that I wasn't ready to have, you know, to open. And so when that happened, and then, you know, the dope was introduced, it just was like this perfect potion in motion, you know, of timing. And what I do remember is that I never, ever felt what I felt when I got loaded. Like, all of a sudden, for the first time, I didn't have to feel the pain. Like, you know, I have a dad that raised me that was an amazing man. And I found out when I was 14, he wasn't my biological dad. By the time I was 15, I was being introduced to this other man that was supposed to be my dad. And he lived in a whole nother state. And I started to feel he was excited and happy to get to know me and meet me. And what I do know is that I started to feel guilty to the dad that raised me.
Yeah.
And so I started to push this guy away and didn't want anything to do with him. And I found myself where him and I no longer talked. He didn't want anything to do with me. He had completely distanced himself and stopped responding to anything that had to do with me. Even years later, when I tried to re-engage with him, he didn't want anything to do with me. So it was, I think, just my whole life feeling unwanted. And what I know is I always felt like, why wasn't anyone willing to choose me? You know, for so long, the pain was, why was I never enough?
Yeah.
Why was I not good enough? Why couldn't I be someone's first choice? I was never the first choice in the relationship. I was never the first choice by my family. I was never the first choice in any way. And so that abandonment and that feeling of like, I think that's just the thing that got me the most, right? And so anyway, when I ended up using, it was like I never had to feel that pain anymore. And I would be able to like go into this other place. And for me, like, I didn't just start using every single day at the beginning. Like for me, I was like, I'm not an addict, so I'm going to use for like 4 days and then not use for 2 weeks, you know, because then if I do it like that, then I'm not an addict.
Yeah.
And then it was, I'm not going to ever touch the pipe. He's got to do that. And so if he's the one doing it, then I won't know how to do it. And so I'll always need him. So what I did was, and thinking that I would never get addicted to the drug, I got addicted to him because I needed him to use. And then I was that closet addict that was like, I can't let anybody know. My mom's very well known out in the community. Like she does all this stuff for the city. And like, if they find out, you know, then what, you know? And so I had to become this closet addict. And what I do know is that he loved me being the closet addict because then I needed him, right? And I couldn't do it without him, which means that he got all the extras, right? You know, so it was all that stuff that started to happen and define my life. And so in that time period, like, the addiction took over a part of me that I never saw coming. Like I had a job, I was manager for an apartment complex, I had a car, I had my kids back. Like I had this whole life. And slowly but surely, not that slowly, I lost everything, you know? And by the time my kids were probably about 14, I lost them. You know, I lost them to the system. I ended up back in jail again. I was facing prison time. I went back to jail for the same things as before. Nothing changed, right? And so I remember I was fighting this, you know, charge to go back to prison, but it didn't stop me from using. Like I talk about this only sometimes, but my truth is when I lost my kids, it wasn't enough. Like when I lost my kids to the system, like I wish I could say that that was my defining moment, that I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do this. Like I'm gonna go get clean, I'm gonna get my stuff together because I can't lose them. But like, it's the exact opposite. I didn't have to hide it anymore. I had no one to hide it from anymore. And then for some strange reason, every single time CPS tried to like drug test me, it came back negative, even if I had just used. So then I felt like a power, right? So like I didn't have to do any substance classes because nothing said that there was substance, even though everybody claimed there was substance. They couldn't prove that, right? And for me, like slowly but surely, like I no longer had to sit in a bathroom, you know, and do dope. I didn't have to be in a garage and do dope, you know, like I could be out in the open and I no longer had to hide it because it almost gave me its own high, like with CPS that they could never like, you know, figure it out, you know? And my oldest daughter, I did a lot to try and get my kids back because more ego than it was because I'm ready to be a mom and I want to do this. It was more ego. That's my truth, right?
Yeah,
and
I experienced the same thing.
And see,
I went
no
to
one
treatment
ever says that.
just because I didn't want to think, like, what are they going to think if I don't? You know, it wasn't because I wanted to be any better.
Right.
I just cared about what they thought.
Exactly. That was 100%. And so it was like well, see, look at, this is what I'm doing. See, this is what I can do. See, and I ended up getting a place, and I ended up getting the kids back. But the truth is, my oldest daughter didn't want to come home. She saw everything. She knew what was going on. She was smart enough to know what was going on, and in that, like, my daughter's mental health was no longer good anymore. My daughter, suffered from her own battles, mental health, substance, and all those things based on the traumas of what was going on and what she had to endure because of me, right? And that's that generational trauma that we have. The one things I said I would never do and I would never allow to happen is now happening, right? And so I got the kids back, and my older daughter did not want to come home. And so there was a lot that happened during that time period. My younger daughter was just so happy to be home. But the thing is I was a different person when they came home.
Yeah.
When they left, I was a closet addict. When they came home, I was an outright blown out addict. Like, I didn't know how to maintain a life. Like, I didn't know how to maintain bills, a house, a car, a job. I didn't know how to maintain anything anymore. I did not know how to live a productive life anymore. And what they left from is not what they came home to. And that's when the relationships started to break with my children. I say all the time, my youngest daughter, I broke her heart. I was the first person to ever break her heart. She had to learn that everything I said was a lie, and all those things that she would be protecting me. My mom's not doing that. And all of a sudden here I am, like, I had to tell her the truth. Like, I am using, because I couldn't hide it anymore. I had changed the lifestyle while they were gone. And by the time they came back, the lifestyle wasn't the same. I could not live a day, an hour without getting loaded. And so that's where everything spiraled out of control for me, and I lost them again, but not this time to the system. This time they both chose to leave, and they went, in their directions of where they went, and didn't live with me. And part of me felt relieved.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, and I don't talk about it all the time, but sometimes we have to talk about these things, right? Yeah. We have to be honest so that the next person that's going through that type of a feeling doesn't hold it inside and not say what they're feeling, or feeling like they can identify with what somebody else is going through, so then they continuously get loaded, or they have those deep, dark secrets that they don't talk about, right?
The shame.
Exactly.
The shame. I just worked a step with somebody, right? And he said some things that he's never told anybody, right? And I was like, bro, like that's that shit that keeps you sick.
Right.
You like a lot of times we think like that feeling, right? That thought, right, is abnormal, right? Until we talk to people. And, oh yeah, I thought about that last week, right? Like there was a moment at the beginning of this year where I was so embarrassed to tell anybody. And luckily I have someone in my life that I trust. But like in that moment, like I felt like I'd rather be a dope fiend than be a fucking dad. I'd rather be a dope fiend and run the fucking streets and worry about these ungrateful ass kids, And is that my truth? That's not my truth.
Right.
Right. But that's my thought. But if I didn't have, like, as shameful as that thought was, if I didn't have someone to be honest with about that, it would have took me down some dark roads, right? Because it already was. I thought about gambling. I thought about getting loaded. I thought about a lot of other unsavory, behaviors, right? The cheapest. Anyways. So my point is, right? If I didn't come to the conclusion, say, you know what, like I need to call my sponsor, I need to talk to him and talk to him. For me, man, like having that non-judgmental role in my life where like no matter what I tell him, it doesn't mean he's not going to tell me the truth, but he's always going to tell me with love, and it's always going to come with love first before he like, okay, this is what I think you should do, right?
Right.
People get loaded over that stuff, right? We talk about this. Mike talks about it, right?
Yeah.
About fucking how some of our fourth and our fifth step shit.
Oh yeah, we joke about it now.
We joke about it now. Yeah. Right?
Privately.
Yeah.
We don't publicly joke about it,
but and not everything either, right? We're not talking about like we're not making fun of trauma. We're not doing any of that, right? But some of the weird things that we did out there, embarrassing things that we did as men out on the streets because of this, because of that, right? Like those things used to if I'm talking about me, it used to hold me captive.
Yeah.
It used to hold me captive. right? And then I opened up to my sponsor at like 5 months clean, right? And I told him about all this shit, right? And then now, like, I sit down with, you know, in a fourth or fifth step with somebody else, and I'm like, this is what I've been through, right? And I could only say that without crying, without breaking, without being, you know, having any reservations about it because of how much I worked through that and how many times I've already shared it.
Right.
Right? Pain shared is pain lessened, you know?
Yep.
And so I like to believe, man, that I think everybody is sick in the fucking head. Like if someone
I
took
know
a journey,
you do.
I look at if somebody took a journey through my mind, they'd be like, this dude is fucked up, right? But the problem with that is my head will tell me that I'm the only one that's fucked up like that.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm sure that many, many people have the same fucked up thoughts that I have the same weird patterns of thinking that I have, right? Have that same deep, dark, despair feelings that I get, right? And so the shame, right, will keep us loaded. It will keep us sick.
Right.
Right? It will, right? And those are the things that we brush under the rug, right? And I love everything you're talking about, right? Because when you go to therapy for trauma, one of the first questions they ask you is, do you have a hard time remembering the situation or parts of the situation, right? Because our literally is basically a computer that is meant to protect us, right? And so those walls that come up, those defense mechanisms that come up, all that stuff feels so natural because your body is doing that, right? I was talking to a therapist the other day. I don't have a therapist, but I work in treatment, so like I have therapists available. And I was talking to her, and I, you know, my head was telling me, don't let anybody in anymore. Don't do any of that. And she said, when you have those thoughts, like tell your brain, thank you for protecting me, but I'll be okay. Mm-hmm. Right? And just that little phrase, like, thank you for protecting me, but I'll be okay. Right? Like just those little things will help me from not reverting back to the old Adam. Right? Not going back into like, I'm not letting nobody in. This is my castle and don't come near it. You know what I'm saying? Or you're going to get beat the fuck up, you know? So it's like we have trauma responses, right? And a lot of that, like you talk about, like disassociating, right? If I could just shut down, if I could just like act like nothing bothers me, if I could just pretend, but all that shit catches up to us. You can't sweep shit under the rug, right? For years and years and years and years and think that there's not going to be no negative effects on that, right? For me, the exposure part of step 4 and 5 were groundbreaking for me. They were like, this is, you know what I'm saying? It was scary. It was hurtful. It fucked me up. But it was like, it's out in the open. Right. My sponsor made me feel like it's not that big of a deal. It happens to many people. That happened to me when I was 8, you know, whatever the case may be, right? And just knowing that that I'm not alone is fucking huge, right? Knowing that like I'm not alone with even the feelings and thoughts I have now, right? Like I seen your tattoo. I don't know if that's a new tattoo, right? But like I am enough, right? That's something that for the last month I've been having to tell myself, like I am enough, because sometimes shit happens and then I get put back in. I'm like so confident, right, of who I am as a man, and then something smacks me in the face and I'm like, I'm still not enough. No matter how hard I try, no matter how good I am, no matter what, like I'm still not enough. But that for me is alive my disease, right? Trying to tell me that all the hard work I've done, every good thing I've done is all bullshit and that I'm still not enough. And that's not true. You know, so sorry. I know I go on tantrums sometimes.
No, it's okay. But that's the truth. That's me telling you about how I always would think to me, like to myself is like, why does no one choose me? Why am I not enough, right? Mm-hmm. Why am I never the one that they're choosing? And that's in every aspect of my life. And so I think about those types of things on a regular basis. But you're talking about that 4th and 5th step, and it reminds me of, so the very first time I worked a 4th step with my previous sponsor, it took me 2 years. It took me 2 years to do that 4th step because I had a secret on there that I wasn't willing to write down. Because I had this secret and I wanted so bad to tell it, but I was not prepared or wanting to write it on a piece of paper. Because what if someone sees it? And then what if if I have to read it out loud, or what if this, what if that? And I remember just holding on to that secret so bad. And this secret felt like I literally could not move. I couldn't grow. I couldn't breathe. Like the first time I did a 4th step, I remember thinking I was so excited because I got to finally tell what everybody did to me. And didn't realize that that's not what a 4th step is. I remember the first time I was like, I can't wait to write down what she did and he did and why and then and him. And
Then it all leads back to you.
yes, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't understand.
This isn't about me.
Right, this is not
It's about them.
me. Yeah. Hello, if they didn't do this, then I wouldn't be here, you know?
That's so
And
funny.
that was like probably the hardest thing for me. So being on that 4th step the second time around, but the first time with that sponsor, I remember finally calling her one day because she's like, when is the pain going to be great enough? And I'm like, the pain is great every day. Like I have a pit in my stomach. You know, I have a reservation. I have a thing that I don't want to talk about that's so, to me, was the most embarrassing, that pride thing again, right? So pride was something that obviously I had to work on. And I remember I was like, look, I'm not willing to write it down, but I'll tell you right now.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay. And I will never forget, like, getting this courage to tell her this secret. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then like I told her and she was like, that was it? She's like, me too.
Yeah.
And that me too was so powerful for me. And in that moment, I knew my God had aligned me to her being my sponsor for a reason so that I can move on and grow. Right?
Yeah.
Because if she wouldn't have told me that, who knows where I would have been. If someone would have been like, you know, brushed it off, dismissed it, didn't understand, or whatever that feeling might have been, made me write it down, even though I wasn't willing to write it down. Maybe this would be a different story today, right? Maybe this would be a different experience for me. But instead, like I had that Me Too moment that allowed me to move on and not have to hold on to something that I thought was like the dirtiest thing ever. You know, and for the first time I got to say it out loud and I got to tell another human being, and this is why it's so important, so we don't have to hold our secrets, because I'm only as sick as my darkest secrets. And if you don't have anything to hold over on me anymore, there's nothing that you can do that is going to take the power out of like my recovery, out of my healing. And like at this point in my life, I'm in such a different place today that like I can hear correction. I can hear, you know, I can be accountable. I can be responsible for those actions, you know. There was so much pain that I brought my children for so long. And what I would like to say is when I first tried to go into therapy with my youngest daughter, I remember, and this, I had maybe 90 days to 6 months clean. And I remember not being ready yet to take personal accountability because I hadn't worked steps, you know, I didn't understand. I started to work like real basic steps, but it was like so basic. And I didn't realize that I was only lying to myself yet, right?
Yeah.
So I know that I was still in a defensive place. So when we went to that therapy and she said things, I was like, well, that's because blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Well, that's because blah, 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 blah. And I never was willing because here's a person that I'm having to be responsible in front of and say all the sick stuff I did in my addiction that my daughter knew, and the pain and the hurt and all those things. And I was just like, had an excuse for everything. I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready for her to share these things with me. And so I do think it's very important that we think really hard before we make decisions. Are we in a healing space to hear it, right? Are we in a healing space that our children don't have to go through more pain because I'm not willing, right? And so what I have learned in these last few years is my perspective is different than your perspective, right? And even if the way my kids remember it isn't the way that it actually happened or the way I remember it,
Right.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the way that they remember it. And so I have to be accountable and I have to say, you know what? I am so sorry that you had to go through that. I can't even imagine what that was like for you. You know, it's starting to recognize that I don't always have to be right. I don't always have to, you know, save face, right? I don't have to be that person because the woman that I am today and the mother that I'm trying to be every single day and the grandma and all that kind of stuff is one of healing, nurturing, caring, loving, kind, all the things that I always wanted to have, I want to be, right? And so for me today, you know, my oldest daughter and I have gone through family therapy and it's been uncomfortable. And she shared things that I'm like, I don't even remember that. But then when she shares it, I'm like, oh, I do remember that, you know? And, but saying like, I'm so sorry, like, you know, and the living amends is I get to be like this amazing grandma to my grandkids today. Like I get to have my kids trust me with their kids, drop the kids off. I get to be, you know, that person, and that's my living amends today, right? And those are things that I never would have been able to do, or things that I could do if I wasn't ready or willing to take the responsibility of those things. And it didn't happen overnight. I definitely didn't have a year, 2, 3 years clean. For a long time, and this is so important, for a long time, I played the victim. What everybody else did to me was so important. That part of my story was more important than anything else. I used because of this. I did drugs because of this. I was homeless because of this. I had this happen, and that's why. He was abusive. That happened over there. All those things happened to me. And one thing that is the most powerful thing that ever happened to me was the day that I had to grieve the victim. I had to let go of being a victim. And I had to start to recognize that, oh my gosh, those things happen to me, but it's how I react to them. And I can't keep holding on to those things, right? Like I have to let go. And I didn't realize how hard it was gonna be to let go of the person that I had molded myself to be. If I could blame everybody else, I never had to take accountability for my actions. I never had to, oh, I did this to my daughter because this happened to me as a kid. Like, no, I did this because I chose things. And I had to grieve a person that I've known my entire life, and that's a victim. And so that was tough. That was the hard part.
That's where the transition is, right? From victim to victorious. You know what I'm saying? It is, because like, everybody's a victim to their own story, but I mean, even the relationships, right? Okay, yeah, he did this, he did that, or she did this, she did that, but same person, different name.
Same person, different
Whose fault's that? You know what I'm saying? Who played the part in that? And that's what I had to understand, and I had to realize, right? It was like, okay, yeah, I had all these failed relationships. Well, guess what? Who's the common denominator and all that, you know?
Right.
So what?
Oh, I was just going to ask her. What led you to recovery?
So I will tell you that that same guy that I was talking about, I talk about this all the time because it was like the best, worst thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to get into too much detail, trigger warning for anybody that's listening right now. But the abuse had gotten so bad that I literally walked around with knots on my head, you know, black eyes. I had I don't know if we could say this on the podcast, but I had weapons under my mattress because I knew either he was going to take me or I was going to have to take him. Like, I mean, there was a time where I remember waking up with, you know, him with surgical gloves on top of me and an ice pick and, you know, having to literally fight for my life. And it just got to a place where it was so bad, I didn't know how to live. Like, I didn't know how to, like, I didn't know what to do. I was walking on eggshells all the time. I didn't know what was going to trigger him. He'd be gone for days, come back, and like just be a totally different person, angry, mean. I didn't know who this person was anymore. And what I do know is the pain finally got great enough, and my oldest daughter ended up, she was pregnant, and I wanted something different, and the only hope that I had was if I got clean, I'd be able to be in his life. And my daughter gave me some ultimatums, and I had to stay clean, and if I wanted to be there when my grandson was born. And I remember doing everything that I could to get clean, and one day, I remember I was sitting in this room at, you know, the trap house, and homeboy hadn't been around because I hadn't been using, and I was trying to stay clean so that I could be there for my grandson. And I will never forget, I had headphones on and I was listening to praise and worship music, and I was crying, and I was sitting in a dark room, and I kept telling God, like, please let you be stronger than the devil, let you be stronger than the devil. And I remember feeling like just so overwhelmed, trying to stay clean so that I could be there for my grandchild. And I remember him walking in the room, and I was crying in this chair, and he was like, you know, taunting me, you know, kicking at me, calling me any type of name. And I just kept with my eyes shut, tears in my eyes, praying to God. And what I know is that in that moment, he took out the pipe, and he was like blowing it in my face, and I'm crying and crying because I'm trying so hard. My daughter's due any day. I can't be loaded. Like, I need to be there. I need to be able to see her. And I remember feeling like literally like movies, like where, there's the good conscience on one side and the bad on the other, and like seeing the little devils, on one side and the angel on the other. And I truly felt in that moment, like, just that demonic presence. And somehow, some way, I was able to stay clean through that, and he left, and I was able to see my grandson be born. And it was little moments like that that gave me a clear mind. It was like those couple of days of sobriety, right, that like helped my mind to think something different. And like I got to see my grandson be born, and I got to be clean and see him be born. And what the crazier thing is that every time I saw him, he gave me a love like I had never felt before. He was like weeks old, and it was like he would get excited, like he knew who I was. Like, how do you know me, right? Like everything was exactly like I call him my angel to this day, right? Because I would go to like my daughter's house. He would sleep on me. He'd fall asleep for like 12 hours with me because I'm coming down, and then we'd like wake up for a minute. I'd give him a bottle. I'd eat something really quick. We'd go back to sleep, and like we would do these things, right? And then what happened was that same guy, though, he started to see the changes, right? And so he started to get a grip on me. And what happened was he started to use my grandson. And so he would do things like bust out my daughter's window so that I wouldn't be at the house. Bust her tires, whatever he needed to do. So if I was with her, then I'm going to be clean, right? And so he would do everything he possibly could to pull me away from being around that. And so I felt like I had to protect my family. And so I found myself right back into the same, like, same pattern. So there was just this last moment in time. My grandson was November, December, January, February, March, 5 months. And I made a decision that I was leaving. I can't do this anymore. I need to get clean. I started looking into programs, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I called my kids and said, I'm safe, but you're not going to hear from me for a while because I don't want him to know where I'm going. And I went to somebody's house that he didn't know and didn't know how to get there. And I hid for days and days and days. And he got absolutely angry, aggressive, anything you could think of. He went into people's houses and was, trying to find me, doing whatever he could. And one day I got a phone call. It was a text, actually. And the text was what I thought was from my daughter saying, meet me in, my son at McDonald's. And I was like, okay. I was so excited. I'm texting. I can't wait. I can't believe she's reaching out to me to see him. And so my friend went and took me to the McDonald's to go see him. And I'm texting because I don't see her car. And, I'm almost there. I'm at the 99-cent store. Like all this stuff, right? And so my friend was like, do you want me to wait here? And I'm like, no, it's fine. I got this. But I'll call you when I'm on my way or when I need a ride back. So I go inside McDonald's and I'm sitting in the little kids section and waiting for my daughter, and she's still not there, and I'm texting her. And so finally I call her because I'm like, where are you? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm at McDonald's. You said for me to meet you here. And she was like, what are you talking about? Like, she was so angry. Like, why, stop putting me in all your stuff, right? And I was like, what? I'm here because of you. Like, I didn't understand what was going on at the time until I saw him walking in. And when I saw him, I was like, oh my God, call 911. I saw the look on his face was, oh my God, this was different. This time was different. And she was like, I don't want to be a part of all this nonsense anymore. And she just hung up on me. And I was like, oh my God. He walks up to me, and I had one bag to my name, and it was sitting on the side of me right here. And he came and he grabbed the bag, and he was like, let's go now. And I was like, I'm not going. And he was like, you're going to go right now. You will never disrespect me like this. I will never forget the look on his face. I never seen him look the way he did. And I was like, I'm not going. And I remember he left with my bag, and I was like, I guess I don't have nothing left anymore. All I had was this phone. And he walked away, and I thought, okay, now what am I gonna do? And all I know is he comes and he pulls up in the car, and he comes in, and he comes and he grabs me, and he's like, you're coming with me? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And he's pulling me. People are grabbing their kids. People are screaming. Like, all this stuff is happening. And what I can tell you is that that's when everything took a toll, and he literally drug me out of that McDonald's. And that's when all hell broke loose for me. So he beat me, tortured me. Anything you could think of. I was unconscious. I tried to run. Like, I could tell so much, but I only have so much time in this podcast, so I don't want to like hold on to just this part, because I want to get into the recovery, because that's the most amazing part. But what I can say is that, we ended up on the side of the road on the freeway, and I had tried to call 911 so many times on my phone, and it didn't work. It kept dropping every single time. And I finally had to make a decision, and I ran. And when I ran, he...
And this was in the desert.
Yeah, in the desert. So we were literally in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing around, just desert everywhere. And on the side of the freeway. So it's run to cars or run to nothing, And so I had no shoes, and I'm running in the middle of traffic trying to get people to stop. No one will stop. He grabbed me up, beat me with a rock. Like, I can just go on and on and on and on. But what I will say is this, I was able to get away, and that was my defining moment in life. And that happened to me March 21st, 2015. And I remember finally getting through to 911 and thinking, I still was trying to make excuses for him. Like, if he wasn't loaded, then this wouldn't have happened, And I remember while I was on the phone with 911, they were like, we've been looking for you. And I was like, you don't even know who I am. And she's like, we're on a high-speed chase with him. And I'm like, no, his car ran out of gas. Like, all this stuff was like going on in my head, because I didn't trust or believe anything that was going on. And like, I didn't realize how bad everything just was, right? And what I do know is that she was telling me, police are coming for you. And the next thing you know, I'm looking, and she goes, do you hear that above you? And I'm like, actually, I do. And I remember hearing helicopter, and she was like, that helicopter's for you. And all these police are like passing me on the freeway, and they're like all stopping. And they're not stopping. All of them are like putting their hands like, we got you. We're gonna, everything's gonna be okay. And what I know is that Riverside County Sheriff's ended up, a sheriff stopped. Not one person stopped in everything that I was trying to do, not one person. But this sheriff stopped, and I remember thinking, oh my God, like I could breathe. And he put me into his car, and he drove me to the closest rest stop. And I sat in the car, and the Palm Springs police came. So it's Palm Springs, Riverside County Sheriff, California Highway Patrol, because of all the different areas that we were in. And I remember the Palm Springs police was the same one that's came to our house 1,000 times for our abuse. And he said, is it finally enough? Is this enough? And I'm like, is what enough? And he's like, is this enough? Is this going to be enough? And the sheriff was like, she doesn't know. And I'm like, no, what? And the cop walked me over to his car, and on the back of the police car was what was called a murder kit. And there was a bag, and it had rope, shovel, zip ties, duct tape, and lye. And he was like, is this enough? He was gonna kill you. Is this gonna be enough? And he was like, obviously said explicit words. And I was like, why is this man being so mean to me? Like, I couldn't understand, you know? But he was just sick and tired. Like, I'm not leaving. I keep going back, right? And so the sheriff, I ended up going to the hospital, and my kids got the phone call that they've been waiting for, right? Like, I don't know how many times I would pray and ask God to take my life. I don't know how many times I would say, like, God, there's people that have cancer, that their family members are sitting at their beds. They're on their knees praying and asking for this person to have life and for, like, cancer to be cured from their bodies. If you just take mine once, my kids will no longer have to feel that pain. Give my life to somebody else's that is, like, meaningful in life, right? And I would pray this prayer so many times, and I just felt like such wasted space. But the thing is in the end, when my life was actually at jeopardy, like, I fought for my life. So subconsciously, I didn't even realize I really did want to live until that happened, right? And so for me, like, the part of my story is that, like, that was the best, worst thing that ever happened to me, because I realized I did want to live. And those next 2 months were probably some of the hardest days. I was homeless. I was in, like, the most disgusted moments of my life, doing the most disgusting things in my life to be able to survive and be able to still get loaded. And, like, for me, like, that's when I had to take a step back and recognize, like, I'm literally gonna die if I don't get clean. And I always blamed him, because remember, victim, I blamed him for why I got loaded. I blamed him for why I used for the first time. I blamed him why I continued to use. I blamed him for all those things. And what's crazy is the day that he got arrested, he went to jail. I got loaded only a couple days later without him. Mm-hmm. And that was my wake-up call of, it's not him, it's me. Mm-hmm. I'm an addict, even though I still was not ready or willing to say that. And so May 21st, 2015 is my clean date, and that was exactly 2 months to the day when I made a decision that this was not the life that I was gonna live anymore, and I couldn't, and I had something more. I didn't know what it was gonna be, but it was gonna be something more. And I did end up in a domestic violence shelter, and in that shelter, I lied at the beginning. I'm not an addict, because I thought people were gonna be like, well, if you weren't using, then maybe he wouldn't have done that. I thought judgment was gonna be, well, you deserve it because you were getting loaded. But the truth is my case manager shared my story. She shared her story, which was my story, and it was the first time, and she shared, like, she was an addict. She shared what he did to her, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, me too, right? And, like, we need those Me Too moments. Those Me Too moments are what saves our lives. Like, we have to know that we're not alone. Like, we walk into the rooms, we walk into, you know, any 12-step, we walk into church, and we think that everybody's different from us, that no one's gonna ever understand us. But the thing is if we don't share our story and tell people, like, what this is, like, we're gonna continue on this path, right? And we need to know that we're not alone and there's other people just like us, right? We need to hear our story. And for me, like, I needed to hear it at the very beginning. And so what I do know is that she asked me if I wanted to go to a 12-step meeting, and I remember being like, I don't know what that is, but sure. And in my head, I know you already know this story.
I was hoping you were going to say it, honestly. I was hoping you were going to say it.
So I'm in an all-women's facility, and one thing I know how to do is I know how to be friends with men. I know how to maybe pick the wrong ones, but I also know how to, you know, have men in my life. Women, like, I couldn't wait to go to this meeting because I was like, whoo, finally I won't have all these women in my face. And at that point, I had, like, maybe 3 weeks clean or something like that. And what I do know is this. I had a little bit of weight on me, but not too much, and I thought I looked really cute. And I got makeup on, and I did all this stuff because I couldn't wait to find the next him. And I walked in to this 12-step meeting, and it was all women. She set me up good. And I remember being so mad, like,
I thought that was coming.
Yeah.
I thought that was coming.
Yeah, I remember looking around, and all I could do was see the differences. Look at her over there. She looks like she's never been through anything. Look at her. I would never hang out with her on the streets. Look at this one. Look at that one. Like, nobody will be able to identify, right? And I remember there was this one woman, and I looked over, and she had her toes all done, French manicure, had toe rings, and I'm like, the hell? Like, what has this woman ever been through? Like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I bet it was so hard for you out there. You
Yeah.
know, what were you doing? Smoking weed, you know?
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
smoking weed is bad too, everybody. Just kidding. Do what you do. So I remember thinking those thoughts, and same thing that same night. So the case manager was like, take a newcomer chip. And I'm like, you have to remember, when nobody's ever gone to a 12-step meeting, people don't know what that means, right? And what I do know is that I was like, no, I'm not saying anything right now. I don't know these people. It's all women. I don't know how to trust women. I don't know how to allow women in. And all of a sudden she said to me, Trisha, oh, congratulations, Trisha. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, my name's Trisha and I'm an addict. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I couldn't believe in that moment, I just, for the first time ever, admitted that I was an addict. Because I just used drugs. I wasn't an addict. But in that moment, it was like so defying and freeing, right? And I remember walking up to the lady that was going to give me a chip, shaking so hard, begging her not to hug me. And she was like, we hug around here. And I'm like, not me, please don't hug. And I was shaking so hard, and she hugged me, and she whispered in my ear, you never have to use again, even if you want to. And that was not powerful for me, because I was thinking, what does that mean? You know what I mean? You know, we make everything difficult, right? And so, but I remember she said that.
Yeah.
And I can understand what that means today. However, I didn't understand what it meant, because if I never had to use again, even if I wanted to, we would have been on this journey a long time ago, you know? But the thing is even though it was uncomfortable, I kept going back. Even though it was uncomfortable, like, I let these people hug me even when I didn't want them to. But what I will tell you is these women told me they love me, and I got resentful. How can you love me? You don't know me. So then I started to think that they were full of crap and that they were liars, right? Because you can't love me, you don't know me. And for a really long time, like, so my youngest daughter ended up coming and living with me while I was in that shelter. She ended up getting pregnant before I got clean. So my 9 months clean was her due date.
Wow.
And that's how God works in my life, right? And so she started to see the changes. She wanted to live with me because she saw the recovery, right? She saw that I was doing the next indicated step, right? Like, I was doing the footwork, and I was, you know, building these relationships, even though I didn't know how to do it, right? And what I do know is for the first 9 months, I didn't go to any co-ed meetings, because I knew that I needed to be with these women. I knew I needed to be in this uncomfortable space for whatever reason, and I didn't know what that reason was, but I knew that's what I had to do, and I kept just doing what I needed to do. And I ended up that I had stayed there for about a year in that area, was the Morongo Basin area, and got clean, was able to redirect life, you know, and learn, like, who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, where I'm going, how I'm getting there. And I started working steps. You know, I did all the things that they told me to do. And I was able to become like this grandma, this mom, like this woman. That was the part. And all of a sudden, I started to be a woman of integrity, right? Like, all of a sudden, all the things that, like, I thought I was doing, like, I started to walk in those things. And I don't know, I think that recovery for me means so many different things in this last 9.5 years. Like, I needed the rooms, the 12-step program for my foundation and my growth. But this last 2 years, things have changed for me. You know, I've been married in the program. I've been divorced. I've gone through some of my worst pain ever in this world, clean, not loaded, and didn't get loaded. You know, I probably went through my hardest moments clean a couple years ago. That same dad died. That dad I thought was my bio dad died my first year in recovery. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I found out he wasn't even my biological dad. So I mourned this man that wasn't my dad, and then have this new opportunity through DNA that there might be someone else, because I don't have to be scared to give my DNA away anymore, because I'm not doing nothing wrong. And so, you know, those are the things that, like, I'm working through today. You know, my ex-husband went out. The hardest thing I ever had to go through, you know, was the worst pain I ever felt. I lived love that I've never had before. I've never been loved the way he loved me. He chose me until he didn't, right?
Yeah.
And so we went back to that same pain that I hadn't healed from yet. So although I was in this place of like, we were this, this power couple, and we were going and sharing all over, and we were doing all this stuff, and like recovery was our life until it wasn't anymore, And I had to learn how to do life without him. I had to learn how to do life alone. I had to learn how to heal myself. I had to learn that it was okay to be at home alone, right? I had to learn that it was okay to like watch TV in silence, and all those things that I didn't know how to do because I've never been alone. Like I've always had my kids. I've always had, the boyfriend, the him, the her, the, whatever. I've never been alone. And all of a sudden for the first time, like I had my own place. And guess what? I had to sit in my own mind. I had to hear the thoughts that I kept telling to be quiet for the last 26 years, because that's how old I am. Just kidding. But, all those things I had to all of a sudden do, right? And so for me, it was the most healing moments that I couldn't have done if me and him stayed together. So although it was the worst pain I endured, like grieving the loss of a husband, felt like I was grieving like he died, And so anyway, with that, I've learned who Trisha is today. And I'm okay with being in silence with her. I'm okay with like doing things just with me. I didn't know how that would look or if I would ever be okay with that. I didn't even know it was something I wanted to do or needed to do, but God did. And so in this last 2 years, I've made some changes. I work in behavioral health today, and I get to work with others that are homeless on the streets and loaded or have their own mental health challenges, and I get to support them and walk them through what it looks like and be their hope and tell them my story and like engage and listen and be an ear in the moment. And I get to do those things for them today. And it's like, I can't believe I get paid to do this. I go to homeless encampments that I've lived before, and I get to say like, me too. And I'll walk you through this when you're ready. Right. And what I can say is 2 years ago, I made this decision. God, I could hear him as clear as day, like you're missing something still. And it's the spiritual aspect. It's the God aspect. Right. So I had been doing this 12-step. I've been working steps. I had a sponsor. I was of service. All those things. And I continue to talk about the higher power, but my higher power is Jesus Christ, right? And we can't talk about that, but I talk about that. Yeah. And it was convicting me. And for me, like God was saying, like, how many times have you picked up the basic text? Now, how many times have you picked up the Bible? Like, how many times have you, made sure you had a home group and went to a meeting? How many times have you gone to church And so like those things were convicting me. And so I started like looking into like 12 steps will always be the foundation of what got me clean, but God's what got me clean and continued to keep me clean. Right. And so those are the things that I started to do. So in my life today, like I said, 2 years ago, I was like, God's telling me to go back home. Go back to the desert. By the way, I forgot to mention the whole part that I moved to Riverside for my entire clean time. So he was like, it's time for you to move. And literally everything like lined up. So I knew it was God, right? Everything lined up. And when that happened for me, it was time for me to start looking for a place, looking for a job. So the job I had a promotional opportunity, and I had these opportunities to do these interviews, and I got the job only in a matter of months, and I hadn't even had a place to live yet. So I was like, oh God, this was faster than I expected. And what I do know is this. I talked to you guys earlier about the poor orientation that I had and feeling that hopeless feeling. So when I got the promotion, I was driving, and I was with my coworker, and she was like, oh, this is the office that's going to be your office now, and it's in Indio. And I was like, we drove in, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me right now. That was the same place I had the parole orientation. And so all that feeling of all those years ago, I'm never going to make it. I'm hopeless. No one's ever going to hire me. I got my job because of my past. I got my job because of who I used to be. I got my job, like in my interview, was sharing my experience, sharing my prison time, sharing all those things. And God was like, oh yeah, if you know, like, and here I was being able to drive up, and now I work in that same building. And so when we have like meetings or things in that same room, I get to like just take a moment and breathe and be like, wow, look at how God has blessed me. And because I listened and I did everything he said, like he's put all these things in order for me. And the relationship with my kids, like just building on those, right? It's not perfect. It's hard.
Yeah.
This is hard work, right, Adam? You know what I mean? It's hard work. But, you know, we get through the things even, you know, in the madness of it all. And so today, like, I get to give back. I get to be of service. I still do my 12-step. I do church. And just recently, my pastor, he ordained me to be the evangelist for the recovery ministry of our church.
That's
and
dope.
like what a trip is that, right? Like who would have thunk 9.5 years ago this would be my life? And guess what? That church is literally on the same street that I used to be homeless. The same street is where he brought me back to. So all my trauma and all my pain, I just got to move back to it 2 years ago. But God's saying, like, we're going to change the narrative. Right. Like, it's not going to be the story you once knew. It's going to be a new one. And so I get to make the conscious decisions every day to be the new version of me and be that woman of integrity. And I get to walk in that every day. And I get to be this new version of me that I didn't even know existed. And thank God he didn't listen to my prayers and take my life, right? Yeah. Like, thank God for all those times that I told him I was wasted space. And he was like, no. You think you're wasted space, but I got so much more in store for you. And thank God that every time I prayed that prayer, I never took action because I was too scared, right? And so now today I get to live a life beyond my wildest dreams. Like, we talk about that, but what does that mean? It doesn't mean that I have everything that I need financially, but I'm spiritually fed, right? I have like something that nobody can take from me today. And these like last 4 years, ever since the divorce, I pray for him and I love him from a distance. I've been blessed enough in this 4 years to probably be in the healthiest relationship I've ever been in my life, right? I've also been able to have the healthiest breakup I've ever had in my entire life, right? With that same person. And today, like, me and him get to be best friends, and we get to talk, and we talk about the uncomfortable stuff, like, you know, and we get to have those relationships because for the first time in my life, I'm healthier. I'm a healthy version of me, right? Yeah. And I am who I say I am. And that's something I've never been before. I was always, I was never the person I said I was because of ego, right? Ego would get me in trouble every time. But today, that's not what it is, you know?
I have a question. Yeah. Do you stop at stop signs and parking lots now?
So it's so funny you say that. So I will get convicted if I don't. So now, okay, so in the complex that we live in, well, it's like a gated community. There's stop signs. Anytime that I don't come to a complete stop, I'm like, dang it, I gotta stop on that one. And like, it convicts me. It's so funny. Dang integrity.
That was amazing, Trish.
I just want to say you are a fucking powerful woman. And I've heard your story before. Not in a long time, in a while, at least the last few years. But like, that was amazing. So thank you for being like vulnerable. Thank you for being honest. And thank you for like, it's crazy because we do the work for us, right? Like, I did the steps. I went to meetings. I got a sponsor. I have a God. Like, I did all that for me, but I didn't realize that it was really for everybody else, right? And all the work you did, right, is for everybody at your church, right? For anybody like who comes in contact with you. Like, I was talking to Mike about this the other day, and this isn't ego, right? But like, this is something I could be like proud of. Like, anybody who comes in contact with me has a positive experience. Right? It doesn't matter what it is. If you come in contact with me, like, there's going to be a positive experience. You're going to get loved. You're going to get cared for. You're going to get talked to in a loving, caring, compassionate way. I'm going to do my best to like give you any tools that I have, right? And like, that's exactly what you just did in this moment, right? You were able to like tie everything you've been through, all the healing you've done, right? And just put it all in one. And I know this was amazing. Thank you so much for really coming out.
Appreciate you. I do want to say this one last thing, and that's that I don't find that him anymore. That him for me is no longer exists. So it's such a trip how all of a sudden, like, that doesn't even like come into my like realm. Like, I don't even know what that kind of a him is anymore. Like, that him doesn't come into my life. And so like I have healed versions, right? We all have healed versions. But what I can say is I expect different because I am different. Right. And I'm the healed version of me today. And so I think that that energy now portrays that. And I remember one day, like you saying to me, Adam, you said something along the lines, you can change it around however you really said it, but this is how I heard it. Remember, we just talked about this. But it was, you said something like, because of how you expect things, it's going to be different, right? Mm-hmm. So like, I expect a man that's going to like take me on a date, that's going to treat me this way, a certain type of way. I didn't even know like I exude that, right? Yeah. And that's not saying that I'm better than. No. It's saying that today I have different standards, right? Today, the way that I live my life is different. And so, I'm not willing to live that other life of control, someone having that control and that pain and that hurt. I'm just not that person anymore. Mm-hmm. I won't be called out of my name today. I will walk away no matter how much it hurts, because I've been through the worst pain of a breakup with my ex-husband, Yeah. So if I don't let him talk to me like that, I'm sure not going to let the next person talk to me like that ever again. Right. So...
Awesome, Trish. You dropped a bunch of nuggets on us. We appreciate that a lot. I got one more question for you before we go. If you could give a piece of advice to a young lady or a young man that's been through some of the things that you've been through or was raised like you were raised, what would that be?
That you're worth it. Like, you're worth it. I choose you. And that's my biggest thing is... to the newcomer or someone that's still in their addiction right now and doesn't know how to get clean, and somehow, some way you were like on this podcast and somehow it came to you, like, I love you, right? And the very end of probably that first year in my recovery, I remember there was, I told you guys about the love thing, right? I couldn't understand love, and I kept praying, and I would cry. Why can everybody say I love you, but I can't say it back? Why do I get resentful? And I remember asking God to, like, please make me love them the way they love me. And I had almost a year clean, and I remember there was this girl in this meeting, this woman in this meeting, and she looked over at me. And I swear it was like she was talking to me and she didn't even know what my prayer was. She looked me dead in my eyes and she looked at me and said, I can love you because you are me, because I am an addict and you're an addict and we are one. And I remember her looking and saying that the healed version of me is the broken part of you, right? And so like I remember her looking at me and like in my soul and saying like, I love you because I am you and you are me. And in that moment, everything changed. So for anybody that's listening and they're not sure, like I am you and you are me, we got this. Together we can like make this happen, you know? And you are worthy. You are so worthy of so much better. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Trish. Thank you, Trish, for coming on. Thank you, everybody who's listening. We'll be back next week. If you guys haven't, please go and follow us on IG, which is the message is hope with underscore between each of them. Make sure you guys subscribe, like, comment, and please share this with anybody who needs to hear Trish's message tonight.
And if you have anybody that you feel would be good for the podcast, please reach out on any of the socials or email us at themessagesHopePodcast@gmail.com.
As someone who struggled with addiction in the past, how does it feel to be able to give hope to others who are still struggling now?
You know, it's such an honor to be able to hear other people's experiences of life, to see how when faced with the very thing that was sent to destroy you, kill you, and take you off forever didn't, but rather you have been given a second chance to give hope and be a light for those who are still in the dark. So don't be afraid to share your message to the world. You never know whose life you might be saving.